Thank you. We're supposed to be having guest speakers tonight, but they're not here yet, so I do have some things to talk to you about, but we'll just have to wing it if they don't show up, because I didn't prepare a lecture. I know lots about lots of stuff, though. I could go on, I'm sure, for an hour and a half about all kinds of things. First of all, I have some things to remind you of. Oh, they're down there. It doesn't matter. I'll remember. The first one is, do not use the email on Avenue to Learn. We will not answer the emails. Do not email us about something that is in the directions for the assignment, like how many pages, because it's in the description of the assignment. We won't answer those emails. Or if it's in the announcements on Avenue to Learn, we won't answer those emails. 24 hours is the time you need to give us to answer an email or a question on the discussion, in the discussion group, and we don't answer them on weekends. So, I get between 100 and 150 emails a day. That's why you may not hear from me right away. Or if you're asking me something that you could look up yourself, why I won't answer you. And I won't answer you if you email me from Avenue to Learn because I can't reply. It won't go through. So please don't use Avenue. What questions do you have about the assignment, etc., etc.? Yep.
So for the marking of the paper, what I'm doing is I'm like highlighting in red the corrections that I made, and then you know how you said to make comments. Does it have to be throughout the paper? Can it just be that write-up, the one page of the paper?
I think it's better if you do them throughout the paper, because what you'll find when you're marking is that you sometimes forget by the time you get to the end. And you can always remove comments. If you make a comment, you go down the paper and go, oh, they did answer that. Then you can always remove the comment.
Okay, and if I can't, on my Mac, I'm having a hard time finding the thing through Word. There is a thing that allows me to put a comment on the side, but I'm not sure if when I send it through Avenue, if it'll go through to you.
Yes, it will. If you put comments on the paper, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, you.
Can you mark it by hand and then scan it and attach like put the picture in Word and then use that?
You can do that, but it will be very hard to mark because we won't be able to comment on it. The thing is, if you do it in Word and do it in the review tool and use track changes and comments, we can also add comments there. So you can comment and we can comment on your comment. That's what's useful. Yes?
Are we expected to like know all the...
I do not expect you to do a perfect job. This is a teaching tool, right? That's why you have this assignment. It's not worth a lot. It's intended to teach you about writing good papers. And one of the best ways to learn is to teach. And marking is part of teaching. So you mark the paper, it means you have to think about what's wrong with that paper and think about what might be wrong with your papers. And hopefully it will help you remember not to use run-on sentences, to make sure that your sentences are clear, to make sure that you support your ideas with evidence, to do citations, all those things. So one of the things that would be helpful, and I'll be uploading it this weekend, is your submission checklist. So there's a checklist that I'm going to ask you to go through before you submit something. And it has all the things you need to worry about. Yay, Tom's here. Ta-da! This is Tom. It's like being a rock star in this class, Tom, I tell you. You get used to it. Yes. So if you could just give us a minute or two so I can help Tom set up for the presentation? Talk among yourselves. I'm sure you have stuff to talk about.
During the course of the provincial election to try to engage voters, but also engage candidates around some of the issues of poverty reduction and social inclusion. And while it's great that I saw about 50% of hands go up, indicating a number of you have voted, it's really important, not only for this election, but I think in terms of our civic engagement and being able to voice where we believe our society needs to go around some of these issues around social policy. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the program tonight. So here's, thank you, Sandra, appreciate that. The PowerPoint is now up, so I will, I'll just get that started. Just as a little bit of introduction, I am Tom Cooper, as you've probably heard, but my job is I work as the director of the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction. And what that is, actually, I'm going to ask for another show of hands. How many folks here are originally from Hamilton? Okay, so that maybe a third. So for some of you may be familiar with some of this work, others may not be. But I'm going to talk a little bit over the next 20 minutes or so about a little bit of the history of poverty in Hamilton, specifically in Canada, in the Western world, really, and bring it forward to discuss where we are right now and how we got here. I'm tremendously honored as well to be joined by another member of our roundtable for poverty reduction, Shamso Elmi. Shamso's sitting near the back, but we're going to show a little bit of we're going to show an excerpt from a documentary that Shamso participated in, talking a little bit about housing in Hamilton and the situation facing many recent immigrants coming into our community. So that'll be another 20 minutes of that documentary. Then I think Shamso's going to maybe say a few words or answer some questions you may have. Near the end, I'm going to talk about where we're headed and some of our roundtable priorities moving forward, an action plan to reduce poverty in Hamilton. So if there's any questions during the course of this presentation, please feel free to ask. I don't mind hands going up, and I'll try to spot you and answer them. The roundtable itself is a collaborative group of about, right now, about 55 members of the community from different parts of the community representing different sectors. So we have folks from the business community, we have folks who are in the nonprofit sector, people in education from here at Mac, from Mohawk College. As well, we have community volunteers, and I think most importantly for our work, our roundtable also consists of a number of people with the lived experience of poverty. And we came into existence about 5 years ago to try to respond to the unacceptable levels of poverty in our community. So I'll talk about how we got there and where we're headed. A little bit of a brief history of urban poverty. So back about 100 years ago, we saw the rapid expansion of people moving into cities. Cities began to grow. People moved away from rural communities into the cities for job opportunities because that's where the action was happening. But cities were growing so quickly that there were a number of societal and social problems that became associated with the mass migration of people into urban centers. And so what we saw was a lot of very poor health conditions, poor sanitation, housing conditions were deplorable. Here in Hamilton, we have an area of town called Corktown, and I've seen pictures from that era where you had 20, 25 people living in one single house, simply because housing was not available and not accessible for a great many people, particularly people who were considered the working class or certainly people who may be experiencing poverty. We knew there was a lot of poverty in communities, but it wasn't at that point the government's responsibility. Government had no role in poverty reduction. So people who were elderly, seniors, had to rely on family once they were no longer able to work. People who became disabled had to rely on the goodwill of their fellow residents, fellow citizens. And while there were charitable organizations, there wasn't any mandated programs to assist. So in the words of, I guess, one philosopher, maybe some of you remember who it was, I can't remember, but life was nasty, brutish, and short. So it wasn't a whole lot of fun for people who were experiencing poverty or the working poor. Going back, or moving forward into the late 1920s, early 1930s, the entire Western world experienced the Great Depression. At that time, again, there were still very few government programs available for people. So if you lost your job, there were very few opportunities for you to really find food, find housing, be able to survive. But as unemployment rates reached phenomenal levels, up over 20%, people in governments really knew that things had to change. So new initiatives began to take shape. The governments began to look at new ideas for job creation. What Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the United States really put into place was a new way of getting people involved. So community work projects, big public infrastructure projects, such as the Hoover Dam, and there were thousands of these different projects in the United States, state-sponsored, but it was able to put people back to work. Canada followed that, not at first, but they realized that was the way they had to move, or else they could potentially be looking at massive social unrest. When you have 20, 25, 30% of your population unemployed and hungry, that's a recipe in many societies for revolution. And so I think our government realized that, and they started to change slowly. The picture I have up here is of unemployed men riding the rails. And my own grandfather actually did this in the late 1930s. A lot of unemployed men would jump on trains and hope to find work at various stops along the way, be they farms or mining towns or logging camps, what have you. And there were thousands of these men unemployed and moving around the country. And so the government became very nervous at that, and they actually began to take action. They developed what now has become known as the welfare state. So between 1940 and 1980, new programs came into existence that had never been there before. So pensions for seniors, old age security, disability supports for people who were perhaps injured on their jobs or simply had another disability that they could not find work otherwise for. Single mothers, mother's allowance, there were new programs for. Perhaps most importantly, by the 1960s, we had a social policy discussion in this country around health care. And led by this gentleman, Tommy Douglas, Canada adopted a universal medical care program so that anybody who was sick in this country, it didn't matter how much money you had. If you were a resident of Canada, you could access health care in this country. And that was, many people consider that one of the most important social initiatives in this country. So during the emergence of this welfare state, we saw poverty rates in Canada drop from 22% in 1960 to about 6.1% in 1991. But there was a bit of a backlash. While the welfare state was emerging, there were voices that were saying, this system just isn't working for us. We're paying too much in taxes. There's too much government service. There aren't enough people working. And so there were voices, quite often from the political right, who emerged saying, espousing new new principles around smaller government, less government intervention, tax reductions. And so governments who advocated that kind of policy initiative started to get elected in the early 1980s. In Great Britain with Margaret Thatcher, in 1980 in the United States with Ronald Reagan, and here at home as well. And probably locally, where we saw the pinnacle of that movement here in Ontario was with the election in 1995 of the Mike Harris government. So this graph shows the rise and decline of government spending in terms of social programs. And you can really see it comes to a pinnacle just before 1980, and then slowly recedes until in 2005, which is as far as this graph goes, it's even less than it was before the welfare state started. So that was the situation by 2005 when our roundtable started. And there were a few things we knew about poverty in Hamilton at that point. So our local social planning and research council, and I think Sandra was saying Deirdre Pike from the Social Planning Research Council was talking to you a bit last week. They came out with a really important report back in 2005 indicating that our city of Hamilton had the highest poverty rate in the province of Ontario, tied with Toronto. Perhaps most disturbing for many in the community was the fact that child poverty rates soared up to 25%. So 1/4 of all kids growing up in our city were growing up in low-income households. We knew there was a lot of work taking place, or a lot of great agencies out there in the community helping people, whether they be homeless shelters, food banks, social service agencies, volunteer centers. But those agencies and those organizations and those faith groups were so busy trying to help people with their immediate crises that there wasn't the opportunity to really look at the big picture, to come to the realization that we needed a systemic approach to reduce poverty in this community. And so that's why our roundtable was created. The City Council asked our local manager of community services at the city to come up with a plan, and she talked with her colleague at the Hamilton Community Foundation. And together they brought a lot of people, community leaders to the table to really look at how we as a community in Hamilton could reduce poverty. The first thing we did as a group, though, was really try to understand poverty. So we knew the basics. We knew there were 96,000 people in Hamilton living in poverty, and that's about enough to fill Iverwin Stadium in the east end of town about 4 times with the number of people living below the low-income cutoff. But we weren't really sure at that time what that meant, who they were. So we had some research done and really tried to break down who was experiencing poverty in Hamilton. So we knew pretty early on that children made up a bulk of people experiencing poverty. There were 22,000 kids in Hamilton. We knew there were a lot of seniors experiencing poverty. About 17% of the total population of people experiencing poverty were seniors over 65. Really shocking to a lot of folks, I think, were that 25,000 people in Hamilton went to work every day. Maybe worked several part-time jobs, maybe worked one full-time job at minimum wage, but still went home and lived in poverty. Even though they were working, they were still experiencing poverty. And we also knew, certainly anecdotally from years of past cuts to the social assistance system, that individuals living on social assistance, be they Ontario Works, which as many of you know is general welfare, or the Ontario Disability Support Program, were living in poverty. And folks, particularly on Ontario Works, were living in the deepest poverty of all. So you might have a level here of poverty, but people on Ontario Works were earning about 1/3 of the poverty line. So close to $6,000 a year to live on, to purchase housing, food, clothing, hygiene products, transportation, at the same time as being required to conduct a job search. So hopefully you can also afford a telephone. So coming to those conclusions, we started to formulate a bit of a plan on how we were going to tackle poverty in Hamilton. One of the other interesting things about the situation facing many low-income families in Hamilton was precarious housing. And what that really meant was that we were looking at a large number of people who rented, who simply could not afford housing and were at immediate risk of homelessness. So because for those individuals who were working, perhaps housing was becoming unaffordable. For those people on social assistance, they could barely afford even the most menial of rental apartments. And that resulted in a significant increase in homelessness in our community in the mid-2000s. So in 2006, for example, we knew that 3,950 men, women, and children stayed at a homeless shelter in Hamilton, and that's a huge number. I don't know how much you can see from this particular slide, but that was Wesley Urban Ministries back in 2006, and you can see the conditions of those mats lined up side by side, all in one room, probably about 50 of them there in a small room. And every night at Wesley Center, there was a person sleeping on each one of those mats. And if you could just imagine what that must have been like for folks, you can imagine the despair many people facing situations of homelessness were living in. But there's some good news coming out of that, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So I'm going to throw out a little trivia question here. Just see if you can answer this. So I'll just ask for a show of hands. Which of the following groups has the highest rate of poverty in Hamilton at 50.5%? So let me just see a show of hands. How many think it's children? A few. Single mothers? Yeah, almost another third there. Recent immigrants. Yep, another third. And senior citizens. Yeah, in fact, it is recent immigrants. At half of all recent immigrants into our community are living in poverty. And they are certainly by far the group most affected by poverty in our community. And part of our job, I think, was to try to tell their stories and try to explain what those conditions were like so we could hope to change it. One of the great ways I think that was done, a tremendous documentary filmmaker, a woman by the name of Laura Skye, produced a video called Home Safe Hamilton, examining the roots of homelessness in our city. And she took a look at the situation of one recent immigrant woman into Hamilton, and the situation her family was facing. And that's Shamso. She's going to talk to you in a few minutes, but I'd like to show you an excerpt from that video, if I may, which I think really reveals a lot about the situation many in Hamilton are facing today. Okay.
Oh, we can put it in here too.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to do mine?
Just a minute. I'm old. I need light to do this. Here.
There you go.
There you go.
That's great. Okay, will I be able to...
There you go.
Thanks. So that was Shamso's story. I'm going to ask Shamso to come up and just say a few words, but there may be some questions for her. I think Shamso's probably one of the bravest people I've ever met, and she's been a tremendous addition to our roundtable for poverty reduction. If you'd like to come up, Shamso, and just say a few words and entertain any questions that our audience members may have.
Hello. You asking me a question, or I have to tell them my story more? My name's Shamso. I'm here for this country for almost like 25 years. And the way you've seen it is I have lots of children. Some of it is my brother and foster child, stepchildren, and grow up for 3 bedrooms only. And that's my life, and I worked for 3 jobs to feed my children, and I hate for social services. And they putting you down for mentally and physically. But I don't have a place to run away other than, to ask for it for social service. And that was mostly they helping me to do my children and, to satisfy myself. And poverty roundtables, I'm in it for the one, the numbers he told them. It's like a 54. Yeah, and I'm one of them. And I chose it because if I could change one things, I would love to change. If I can talk about it for poverty, yes, but that's not my label. I don't want it to give it to me the label of poverty. No, I love to work, and I'm a hard worker. I'm a good mother, but I don't like to give me the label of poverty. But eventually, this is the life of here, but I'm not complaining. Canada is the best place to live, and especially Hamilton is the best place to educate it for the kids, because it's not too big, not too small. At least I can control my voice. So that's my real story.
Are there any questions for Shamso right now? Or there's one over here.
Yes.
So, sorry, do you have any other cases where they reacted differently when they found out that you were covered? Or was that the only case?
No, it's a lot of cases. It's, let's see, even though if you wanted to go to work, I used to work a lot of places. It's like Okram Farm Bakery. They asking me, I taken off for my hijab. And they give it to me, the something I have to put around the head. It's like hello? It's like you saying to me, you don't want the hair in the food, but you saying to me, take it off for this one. How is it gonna fit? But they said, it's a safety issue, this is the machine. And I said, listen, I can do for this way, put it on the top of that, then give it to me, whatever you wanted to give it to me, the top of that. It's the job. It's very difficult. The housing is very difficult. To go even the police to complain is very difficult. It's like everybody, they judging you before even you talk. They judging you, oh, you dress up, oh, too much clothes. Where is this clothes is come from? It's like oh, it's light. Summertime, don't ask me. They said to me, are you too hot? Even the people who's walking, it's too hot? No, actually, I'm too cold. No, I'm serious, because it's like the sun, you cover. It's place is comfortable. Thank you.
So if there aren't any other questions, thank you very much. Oh,
Yes.
there we go.
Hi.
What would be the most helpful thing that we could do as a community to make life easier for newcomers?
Don't be judgmental. And be easy and start listening to them. It's newcomers. I'm working for Wesley Urban Ministry, and I'm doing for a life skill trainer for newcomers to teach them how to go for the buses and stuff like that, and how they have to work, how they kind of fit for this society. But it's mostly things. It is like you don't speak English, listen. Don't be judgmental. Don't say that, it's too much clothes or too much this. Don't. I'm human being like you. I have red blood like you. So that's the major things to help. Listen. Yes.
How did you find out about the programs that Hamilton offers?
Hamilton is offering a lot of things. But is the problem it is you don't know it. And the biggest problem it is I'm facing it, the people I'm advocating is facing it, it is they don't know. And it's no easy to grab it for that information. So all the time I'm, jumping all over. You can see me in immigration, you can see me in a welfare, you can see me in a homeless shelter, you can see me on the street. Like I love to advocate it. I love to tell them for the newcomers, this is the place. You can find here for this, you can find it here. The food bank is here. It's not a big help, but it's a food bank here. Because when we are a Muslim, we don't have a lot of choices, especially food banks and stuff like that. It's a part of, poverty issue. Because as a Muslim, we don't eat the pork. We don't eat something is not a kosher. Yeah, we don't eat those things. And mostly of it, the food bank, they give it, there you go, there you go, there you go. I can't eat these things. Too bad. You're not hungry. But I'm hungry, but I wanted my dignity and to my religion to die for it. Thank you. Yes.
You said when you first moved to Canada, you were in Ottawa and around that area first. Did you experience the same kind of difficulty there? Did they have more programs towards poverty or less?
First of all, it's like I don't know it for that time when I came to Canada. Is all I know is that Canada is rich, and still I believe they are rich. And the poverty, I never have for that numbers things, and I don't know it. All I know it is like I wanted to work, and my husband wants to work, but we don't have that opportunity because if you don't have a landed immigrant, you cannot work for any places. And it took us for 6 years to get the landed. And that was the biggest hard things. And you cannot go to school, you cannot work until you have the landed. And it was very difficult. The time is changed. Now it's becoming easier and easier. But in Ottawa and here, it's the same. But I feel it like in Hamilton, I lived it 16 years. For Ottawa, I lived it for 3 years. 16 years is different than other places.
I think there's one more.
Okay.
How did you learn to stick up for yourself?
Oh, that's very hard. You don't have to afraid. That's what I have to teach myself, don't afraid. It's like if you talk and, you will get it, at least it's 100 people. Only you find for one person wrong, one person hateful, but other than they will be helpful. is, that is giving me motivation to move on. Everybody is not the same. They are different. I hope I answer your question. It's very difficult.
Oh, just one at the back.
The welfare they paying for 3 children and up. They don't care how many children you have. It's that time, and up to now, it was $670. It doesn't matter. The house is $1,000 or $100. If it's $100, yes, they give it to you less, but they give it to you that amount. And when is the Harris government is a start, they reduced it for 22% for the incomes for the family who's taking it. And imagine when you're taking it for $2,000 for 8 children, and then they reduce it for 22%, how much it's gonna be, and how much you're gonna end up. Each money they given to you, even child tax benefit, it wasn't that much before. But 1 penny, if they adding to you, the welfare they subtracting. And the life of, the shirt, the pant, because my boys, and you know it, and you were a child one upon a time, right? So you will ask your parent, I need the names. I need jacket names. I need the name of shoes names. Some parents, they don't afford it. Believe me, I will go for some places, it's like second-hand stores, and clean up, and I give it to my child. And 1 penny, it isn't left for 15 of the month. I don't have a 1 penny. I have to go food bank to food bank, and they know each other in a computer. Oh, you take that food bank, and it doesn't help for other 15. So it's not helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, one more. One more, that one.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
How do your children feel about the situation?
Thank you very much. The children, they don't understand, the parent, if they take in a welfare or not. The children, they understand what they needed. Mom, I need this. Mom, I need this. They don't know the pressure of the parent. And really, we have a big shoulder. But if you look into us, we have a small shoulder, really. And they are demanding. The children, they are more demanding. So still, it's like my children, I never tell them I don't have money, but I will tell them, tomorrow I will buy it. Mom, tomorrow is never finished. I know, tomorrow. That's what it is, tomorrow.
So thank you, Shamso. And she's certainly been a tremendous asset to the work we're doing in Hamilton around poverty reduction. One of the groups that Shamso is involved with, the working group of the Round Table, is working on shifting attitudes about poverty in our community. And I think with spokespeople like Shamso, it's just tremendous the impact she has on people when she talks to them about her situation. So that's why we're trying to get people's stories out so that we can break down stereotypes about people living in poverty. Also, just related to the video, you saw some of the pretty deplorable conditions around those rental accommodations. Megan Ross is here, and Megan is the coordinator for a tenant education outreach initiative that's run by the Housing Help Center and some community partners. And Megan works with folks in the community, tenants associations, trying to advocate around some of these issues you've seen. So just in terms of the housing conditions, looking at better standards, ensuring the city inspects some of those conditions so that landlords don't get away with, quite frankly, being slum landlords. So there's ongoing work on that. But again, it's very tough in the current economic climate and with government austerity programs to really get the resources that are needed to really monitor some of those rental housing conditions. So it's an ongoing issue that really does need support. So thanks for all the work you do, Megan. Moving forward, one of the questions was around related to food banks, and it's important to also understand the situation facing a large number of people in this community. Right now, in Hamilton, about 18,000 people, women, men, and children go to a food bank every month in this community. So here's another trivia question. I'd just like to see a show of hands if you happen to know the answer. Close to 20,000 individuals use a food bank every month in Hamilton. What percentage of those individuals who use a food bank do you think are in receipt of social assistance, so government social assistance programs? How many folks think it's 25%? 40%? A few? 60%? A few more? 75%? Those two folks at the back are right. 75% of all people using food banks in this city are on social assistance. And that tells you something. It tells you that the amount of benefits people are receiving, and Shamso alluded to this, are certainly not adequate to allow people to feed themselves. Government benefits are simply too low. So people are forced to go to food banks because they don't have enough resources to purchase food on their own. So what's that going to result in? Well, another trivia question for you here. According to the Department of Public Health, a person living in poverty is 3 times more likely to, what do you think here? Be hospitalized for diabetes, show of hands? Be hospitalized for a mental health illness? Yep. Okay. Be hospitalized for lung ailments. You're all right, because all 3 of those things are true. People living in poverty have far, far worse health outcomes than the general population. Has anybody heard of the Hamilton Spectator Code Red report? A few people. It's it might be we might try to. I'll see if I can get some copies for you, so you can share with the class. But it was really a groundbreaking look at poverty and health in this city. And investigative reporter Steve Bust, who's worked at the Hamilton Spectator for a number of years, he's a really good investigative reporter, took statistics that people haven't really looked at a whole lot before, and he compared neighborhood poverty to neighborhood health outcomes. And what he discovered was, quite frankly, atrocious. It showed a 21-year gap in life expectancy between Hamilton's highest income neighborhood and Hamilton's lowest income neighborhood. 21 years, that's an entire generation. So if you're a person living at the margins, a vulnerable person living in the north end of Hamilton by the steel plants, you're going to die 21 years earlier on average than somebody living up on the West Mountain on the escarpment. That really opened a lot of people's eyes in this community. But what was more, Code Red also showed that there's a huge expense to society as a result of poverty. We know people are using emergency rooms more. There's higher rates of low infant births for people experiencing poverty. And it's for a multitude of reasons. But if you have the chance to look at something called the social determinants of health, it will show you that you need a whole lot of things in your life to be able to be healthy. And that includes an adequate income, that includes housing, that includes employment. It especially also includes being able to participate in your community. And that's why I said, when I asked earlier, how many folks voted, it's really important to do that sort of stuff, to be able to participate in your community's life and be able to participate civically, because it is an important role you have in society. So the Hamilton Roundtable, knowing all these things, came together and really tried to convene a community conversation about poverty reduction. And we're getting on a bit in time, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit here through some slides. But suffice to say, we attempted to bring the community together under a collective umbrella, really, to speak with a unified voice about the importance of poverty reduction. And the Hamilton Spectator, who also produced that COVID report, also came on board as an important media partner. And they took all the stories off their front page one day a couple of years ago, and they said they were going to do things a bit differently at the newspaper. So I don't know if you can read this, but I'll read it out for you. It says, "The stories have been removed from this page to remind us that nearly 100,000 children, women, and men live in poverty in Hamilton. People whose stories rarely make the front page. We're going to change that." And so they took it on as a journalistic commitment, as an editorial commitment, even as a corporate commitment to really try to change community attitudes about poverty. And they've done that. There's been hundreds of stories written about poverty reduction in this community over the last few years. And it's really, I think, a credit to the integrity of that newspaper that they've been able to do that. Sure, they're not perfect. Sometimes stereotypes still pop up from time to time. But I think for a newspaper, a major daily newspaper in this country, in North America, this was the first time any major newspaper had taken on poverty reduction in that way. We as a roundtable really wanted to create a new space for discussion in the community. So we wanted to shift from talking about poverty alleviation to talking about poverty prevention and poverty elimination. We wanted to tackle the root causes of poverty. One of the important things we did was really establish a no-blame table so that people who came around to discuss poverty reduction understood that we were not going to be blaming folks as part of the solution, but we all wanted to work together. But we also wanted to emphasize innovation, risk-taking, and especially long-term change. So there have been some successes in the last few years. And you'll recall I showed that slide a little while ago of Wesley Center and all the mats on the floor around homelessness for people who are experiencing homelessness. That shelter is today closed. And it's closed, its closure is actually a good news story, because Hamilton shelters were able to come together in a new way and really look at how they could respond to people with poverty. So I don't know how many of you realize this, but it actually costs a lot more for the government and for taxpayers, really, to keep somebody at a homeless shelter for 1 month than it does to pay them Ontario Works. So it costs $1,200 a month to keep somebody on one of those mats you saw earlier for a month at Wesley Center, whereas most single individuals on Ontario Works are only getting a little bit less than $600 a month to live on. So, people started thinking about that, and that absolutely doesn't make any sense. Why would you pay to have somebody stay on a mat at a crowded, likely unhealthy shelter when they could potentially have their own rental accommodations with some supports for the same amount of money? So that's what they did. They talked to the government. The homeless shelters came together and developed a program called Hostels to Homes, where they took that very same funding that would otherwise go to keeping somebody in a shelter and basically provided them with a little bit of extra supports through Ontario Works and through other means to get them into housing, and provided some ongoing supports for those folks. And as a result, we've seen people in long-term situations of homelessness in this city move out of homelessness into some stable housing. And that's great. Yes?
My sister actually works with Transition to Home, and she's told me that she's been trying to get funding from the city still to create more programs.
Yep.
And she told me all the steps she has to go through, and it's not that simple. She can't even get programs for her clients sometimes because the government will accept her requests, and it's not easy.
No, it's not easy, and it hasn't been an easy system. The current system right now, and that's absolutely right. I'm not sure how many of you heard that, but there's big challenges with getting people into some of these units. There's been about 200 people who have moved into situations of some stable housing, but a lot more remain on the list, and there's big challenges, particularly for women experiencing homelessness, who have a different set of challenges. So it's not a perfect system for sure. And the way government funding is structured, it's been incredibly difficult to try to get the government to provide funding for some of these innovative programs. More recently, over the last couple of months, the provincial government, the current provincial government that's in place as of today, who knows what will happen in 45 minutes, but the current provincial government did develop a new Ontario-wide housing strategy, which hopes to address some of that, but it hasn't really been rolled out yet, so it's giving cities a little bit more flexibility over how that money can be spent, and hopefully the ability to continue with these types of innovative programs. But it's a very good point, and thanks for raising it. So there has been the successes around hostels to homes, which is now transitions to homes. There's been a reduction in poverty in Hamilton as of the last census by about 6,000 individuals. There's been millions of dollars leveraged in the community towards poverty reduction initiatives. But we knew as a result of the big recession that hit that many people fell back into poverty. Hamilton, as many of you know, is a big manufacturing town, but over the last 15 years or so, we've lost tens of thousands of jobs in the manufacturing sector, and those high-paying jobs haven't been replaced. And so it's been very, very difficult for our community and communities like us, like Windsor and London and Welland, to really be able to move out to achieve what we need to achieve to reduce poverty. So what we at the Roundtable really did was look at a new action plan around how we could address some of these big systemic issues. There was a lot of work being done on poverty reduction, but a lot of it, unfortunately, was tinkering around the edges. If we're going to reduce poverty for the next generation, we have to think big. And that's what we decided to do last year. And we developed a new action plan. So our action plan is our goals: continuing to shift attitudes about poverty, look at addressing income disparity, include all citizens in community life, and promote innovative ways to tackle concentrated poverty in neighborhoods. So how are we going to do this? Well, part of it is around shifting attitudes about poverty. And you heard from Shamso that it's very important, I think, to get people's stories out there. And to have community realize just what the situation of many people living in poverty is about. Sorry, this PowerPoint is having a little mind of its own here. One of our action plans around shifting attitudes about poverty is to develop a speakers bureau, as I said earlier. And we have the great opportunity and honor, I think, to work with some of Sandra's other students in third and fourth year to look at how that speakers bureau is going to be developed. So really, it's based on a model that's being used widely in Toronto called Voices from the Street, but it's being able to work with people with the lived experience of poverty, provide them with some supports to really look at how they can go out and tell their own stories. So with supports enabling them to go talk to student groups, to talk to churches and faith organizations, to go to service clubs like the Lions Club or whatever, to talk about their stories and really try to continue to shift people's attitudes about poverty. And I'm going to tell you why that's so important. When I make these presentations sometimes, I use the phrase that we as a society find poverty acceptable. And we find child poverty acceptable. And I'll tell you why I think that. We find poverty acceptable because we're not willing to make the tough decisions to get rid of it. A few years ago, there was a a group of Swedish housing delegates that visited Hamilton. And those folks came to Hamilton to talk to some of our social housing providers about social housing in this city, and they were learning, how we did things here, and maybe they might try to go back and apply some of the lessons to their own jurisdictions. But for some reason, the conversation between the Swedish housing delegates and the Hamilton housing delegates got onto the fact that many people living in social housing in this community, and by the way, there's Megan, an 8,000 person waiting list right now for social housing. So a lot of those folks are in receipt of social assistance as well, and are required to go to food banks to supplement their food requirements because they simply don't have enough money to purchase food. So the Swedish delegates looked a little perplexed, and they turned to our folks and said, why would anybody want to put food in a bank? And they said, no, it's not like that. These are agencies where people have to go to get some extra food because they can't afford to get it. And the Swedish delegates were incensed. Not only had they never heard of a food bank, they told our delegates that if a food bank existed in their country, no politician would be able to keep their job. And that's a values choice for them. They value the fact that people should not have to go to food banks. People should have enough resources, should be provided with enough security that they don't have to go to food banks, and they should be able to live a healthy, sustainable life. And that's a value of their country. And that's great. And, more recently I talked to another person who had spent a considerable amount of time in Sweden. And so I brought up this same story. I said, is that true, or is that, like an urban legend? And she said, no, that's true. People were incensed when the homeless rate went up from 10 to 14 in Stockholm. And I said, wow, that's pretty high, 10 to 14%. I'm thinking that's nothing to be really proud of. She said, no, homelessness went up from 10 people to 14 people, and people were incensed. So the society has accepted that poverty at that level is completely unacceptable. And so I think we can move to that. There's no reason that Canada, as a giving, caring community, should not. Hamiltonians, as many other communities are very generous. When there's a need at the local food bank, when the food bank shelves run short, people donate. But there's a bit of a disconnect for me because people aren't necessarily willing to put enough trust or faith in those individuals who need those services to pay them adequate levels of social assistance. So those are the sorts of things we need to really have a mature conversation about, not only in this community, but in this province and across this country. And I have been a little bit disappointed that there hasn't been more of a dialogue over the last couple of weeks on the need for an expansion of the provincial poverty strategy. But we'll see what happens in the election tonight. But I really think governments at all levels need to take more responsibility for this issue. And we've seen the most recent polls that have come out during this provincial election that have asked people about issues they care about. Poverty rates up there. Poverty reduction rates up there. It's higher than education. It's higher than the environment, believe it or not. It's higher than energy, and it's higher than crime. And so these are issues that people do care about. But for some reason, politicians just aren't getting that. So we're continuing to do our work around shifting attitudes. One of the other things we're doing as a roundtable is promoting the idea of around community development. And some of you probably know about community development. I won't go into too much detail on it, but it's really trying to develop the assets in local neighborhoods to build a to build strong and resilient neighborhoods in our communities. We know, as I mentioned, because of the Code Red Spectator series, there's lots of concentrated poverty in certain pockets in Hamilton. But there's been a lot of great work done to build up neighborhood capacity over the last few years. And so just recently, over the last year, the City of Hamilton has invested about $2 million in a new neighborhood strategy. They've appointed a new coordinator of neighborhood development. And we're going to be looking over the next year of really trying to step things up to build up capacity in neighborhoods so people can move out of poverty. And so there's some exciting work taking place on the ground around community development. So if you guys are thinking of potential career paths over the next few years, community development is one I would highly recommend, and I think Megan could probably speak to the importance of it as well, because she does that on a daily basis, and it's really a fulfilling job. It's something I did for 10 years at a community legal clinic, and it's something that I think is going to be essential as we move forward. One of the other things we're working on is making Hamilton a living wage community. And living wage is not necessarily a new concept, but it is a concept, I think, whose time has come. A living wage is basically, in short, the amount of money a family needs to not only live above the poverty line, but to participate in their community. And right now, as you saw from the earlier numbers I presented, about 25,000 folks work every day in Hamilton and still live in poverty. But if they were earning a living wage, we would move all of those individuals out of poverty. So right now, living wage in Hamilton has been calculated. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's a bit of a secret. But it's something we're going to be bringing forward over the next month or so to really try to engage the city government, to engage key public institutions like the university here, like Mohawk College, like the hospitals, like the school boards, and private businesses, to tell them that there is a strong community benefit and a strong business case to be made for paying your employees a living wage. It goes beyond minimum wage. Minimum wage can be considered a bare survival wage, but we know, there's already 25,000 people in Hamilton earning minimum wage and they're still living in poverty. So living wage goes beyond that. It enables families to participate more fully in community, and it creates a healthier society. It creates a more skilled workforce. For employers, it creates less turnover, and really it costs society a whole lot less down the line. So we're going to be putting on a big campaign over the next little while to try to convince our city government and some of those key public institutions to adopt living wage. There's 2 cities in Canada right now that are living wage cities. They're both out in BC. There's about 140 cities in the United States, including New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, that are living wage communities. The London Olympics is the first Olympics in which all the people who are going to be working at it are earning a living wage. So this is sort of an international movement, and it's something I think we can take a real lead on here. Yes, question?
There's actually cities in Canada already that have that.
Yep.
How does it compare to the minimum wage?
It's generally a couple of bucks higher, $3 or $4 higher than minimum wage. Well, we're going to try to push it, and it's a progressive employment practice. It's not something we're looking to legislate. It's something we're trying to convince employers, both in the public sector and the private sector, that's a good thing to do, because we know, a lot of people are earning, $10.25 an hour, and they're not being able to make ends meet. So a question our former chair of the roundtable used to ask people is, would you be willing to pay 10 cents more for a cup of coffee if you knew the person at the other end of the counter could go home and purchase medicine for their kid if they needed to, if their kid was sick? And I think most people would say yes. Yeah, it may result in some price increases in some cases, but we're not talking about a huge percentage of the working population. But I think if we're looking at bridging the inequality gap that currently exists, it's vital to take this step. Right now in Hamilton, a new report just came out on Tuesday that showed that more people than ever before in this city are earning more than $100,000 a year. But at the same time, we know more people are also going to food banks, and more people are on the social housing wait list, and more people are on Ontario Works than ever before. So there has to be some reckoning, I think, between that gap. So living wage is one of the ways we're hoping to do that. One of the other things we're hoping to do, and there was a couple of questions around food security. Incubate a universal school nutrition program for all kids in Hamilton. And this is a big, I'll call it scary just because I know it's going to take a lot of work, but it's a big idea that we hope can be adopted. And it's already gained a little bit of momentum. The Roundtable came up with this proposal last year, last October, but really it was to ensure that all kids who are going to school in Hamilton have the opportunity to get something to eat at school. And it's nutritious food because we know that there are far too many kids going to school hungry, but I think more importantly than that, there's lots and lots of kids leaving school hungry and they're not getting the food they need at home. So we think there's a role for the public education system to play along with governments in ensuring kids get fed at school. And most recently, over the last couple of weeks, we heard one of the political parties commit to a nutritious snack program for every kid in Ontario. And we think that's a start. It doesn't go far enough, but it's a good start. And we will certainly be continuing to push that forward over the next few months and years. The big one we've been working on over the last couple of months is social assistance reform. And I'll just take a couple of minutes to talk about that. We've talked about some of the numbers. The fact that about 62,000 people in this city are either on Ontario Works or Ontario Disability Support Program, so that's over 10% of the population. But you also know the inadequate amount those folks are receiving. So $592 for a single person on Ontario Works. The government of Ontario committed a couple of years ago in their poverty reduction